Hello viewers, in this video we will be learning how to define variables inside Node.js using let, var or const. All the three are basically used in order to store any kind of data, be it string, be it numbers, arrays or objects. But they all differ and we are going to see these differences as we proceed in the video. Along with this, we will also be studying two very important concepts in JavaScript related to variables, which are hoisting and lexical scoping. Let's begin with the video. Let us see how the var keyword works. In order to define a variable using var, you simply have to write the keyword var followed by the variable name and the data. In this case, I am creating a variable called city and storing Mumbai string in it. Let's say I write a function print city and I call this function. And hey, it is printing Mumbai. But how is the city variable accessible within the print city function even though I have written it outside the print city function? The answer to it is that var has a global scope or a function scope depending on how we use it. In this particular case, I have declared the var city outside the function. That is why city now has a global scope and it becomes a global variable. That is why we are able to access it within the print city function. Now let us talk about the problem with var. We are able to define a variable, it is working, the program is working absolutely fine, but what is the problem with var? And the problem is that we can accidentally redeclare it and redefine it. So I can do something like this. And this as well works fine. And this is a big problem in case when you are working on large code bases, there's a high chance that you might miss out that you have already declared a city variable and you are again redeclaring it and giving it a new value, and this can create problems in your code. So this is why two new keywords called let and const got introduced in the ES6. For those of you who do not know what ES6 is, ES6 is the 6th version of the ECMAScript. Now ECMAScript is what makes web pages compatible with every browser. So every browser has to follow certain specifications and these specifications are laid out in the ECMAScript standard. JavaScript has been built around this ECMAScript standard, and since every browser follows this ECMAScript standard, that is why your web pages will be compatible with every browser. Now let us have a look at the keyword let. So let is exactly used like var. As you can see, let us run this file. So Mumbai gets printed. As you can notice, let is doing the exact same thing as var was. Then how is let different from var? And the answer to it is, it depends on the scoping. Var is global scope or function scope depending on how we write it, and let is block scope. Okay. Now let us see what block scoping is. Let's say if we have some condition that is evaluated true, and if we write something like this, var country equal to India, and outside this if condition we print the country variable. Let's run this. India has been printed. Now let us try the exact same thing using the let keyword. As you can see, the console throws an error saying country is not defined, and this is what block scoping is. Now what actually is a block? Any if statement, else statement, if else statement, switch statements, try catch, all these are block statements. Any variable that you define within these block statements that are defined using the let keyword will have the block scope. Now let's take an example. Let city equal to Mumbai and we try to change the city. As you can see, we can change the city variable if it is defined using let. Now how do we make our variables such that no one accidentally dates the variable? In order to do this, we can use the const keyword, which stands for constant. Okay. Now let us try to understand how the const keyword works. Let's say we have defined const city equal to Mumbai, and now we are trying to reassign the city variable to Delhi. Let's try to run this. As you can see, assignment to constant variable. This is what the error is being thrown over here. That means using the const keyword, we can prevent any reassignment of variable. That means now we can protect our strings, numbers, booleans, arrays, or even object from reassignment. But let's try an experiment to see if we can mutate the array elements. As we know, reassignment is not possible, but now let's try to date the array elements. Let's change it to 4. Let us see if this is doable. And this is the thing that we need to remember about arrays, that reassignment is not possible, but for arrays and objects we can manipulate the individual elements, and in case of objects we can update the property. Now let us have a look at a very important property called hoisting. Let's say I try to print the city and then I try to define it. Now let's see what happens in this case. So the code hasn't crashed, okay? It has simply printed the city value as undefined. And the reason for it is JavaScript interprets the above two statements as so this property of JavaScript of bringing the variable declarations at the top before the code execution is called hoisting. In JavaScript, not only variables but also functions get hoisted. So let's say we have a function called print city, which prints Mumbai. And let's try to call this function before even defining it. And it is able to print Mumbai. This is because before the code execution, JavaScript brings these functions and variables to the top of the code, and that is why it is able to print city in this case. Now let us see what happens in case we use let or const. Do they get hoisted too? Now let us see in case of let or const how does hoisting work. Now let's see in case of let or const how does hoisting work. As you can see, when we used let instead of var, it threw us an error in this time saying cannot access city before initialization. So does this mean that in case of let, hoisting does not happen? The answer to it is that in case of let also hoisting happens, but there is a temporal difference between the 2 points where the let variable got hoisted and its value got initialized. So between these 2 points of time, if we try to access the variable, it throws us the error that it cannot access the city before init. So hoisting has actually been happened, but since the variable was not initialized, JavaScript has thrown the error. And exactly same happens for const. It does get hoisted too, but since if the value is not initialized, JavaScript throws us the error. And this was about hoist. Now let us try to understand what lexical scoping is. As you can see, I've pasted a small code snippet over here. We have an outer function, and inside this outer function definition, we have written the inner function definition. So basically these two functions are nested within each, and inside the outer function, I'm also making the call to the inner function. So basically if I'm calling the outer function, the inner function is also getting called. Now let us try to see and analyze how is this going to behave. So as you can see, var, let and const have been printed inside the inner function. Okay? So if I run this, Mumbai, Delhi, Bangalore have been printed. Now this property of JavaScript in which inner function can access the parent function's variables, this is called lexical scope, and that's pretty much about lexical scoping. Now, here's a short summary of the entire video. Where has a global or function scope, and the problem with it is that redeclaration and reassignment are allowed. In let, the scope is block scope. Let can be reassigned but cannot be redeclared. Const is block scope, and const variables cannot be reassigned. But object property and individual array elements can be updated. Also, const variables cannot be redeclared, just like let. Hoisting is a JavaScript mechanism where variables and function declarations are moved to the top of their scope before code execution, where let, const all are hoisted but different. Lexical scoping: when there are two nested functions, inner function can access the variables of the parent function. This property is called lexical scoping. I hope the video was informative for you and helpful to you. If you like the video, do hit the subscribe button as well as give a like to the video. Thank you.